the Chinese could sell treasuries and impact negatively our economy?
I could burn down my house if I had an argument with my spouse, but it's not going to do me very much good. I think the Chinese, I think they would acknowledge, but they've been reluctant to do it, and they favor production and manufacturing over consumer. The first contour of a deal would be for them to take steps to increase consumption, help households, and stop the subsidy to the manufacturing sector. For NVIDIA to bring this home is very important. One of the greatest security concerns for global economy is the number of chips made on the island of Taiwan. To have one of the most important components made in one place is not great risk management.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for having us inside the Treasury. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, no, this is
especially on April 15th.
Yes, tax day, of course. And of course, Mr. Secretary, we do sit here on tax day. Consumer confidence, it has been under pressure. Everybody loves to look at eggs, one of their favorite barometers. They're at record highs, according to the CPI. The 10-year that has climbed to about 4.5%, has backed up a bit. And Mr. Secretary, I just had the CEO of Constellation Brands, they make Corona beer, telling me consumers are pulling back. Level set for us. What's the state of the economy through your eyes right now?
Well, Brian, let's back up a little. Egg prices, I believe, are down 50, 60, 70% off the highs. We inherited an egg inflation when President Trump came into office. I think egg prices were up 200 and something percent under the previous administration, and just through culling fewer hen houses and some imports, we were able to alleviate that. So, check. And consumer confidence, we're seeing some concern in the survey data, but we haven't seen anything in the hard data. So very, very solid job market last week, up 228,000 versus an expectation of about 150,000. And we have lots of CEOs come in, especially from financial institutions, since we're here at Treasury, and they're seeing solid credit card spending growth. They think the consumer's in good shape, corporate's in good shape. So in my prior life in the investment business, what we were not good at, and I think it's very hard to be very good at, is predicting the macroeconomic numbers. But what we did was form a mosaic. We called it the micro, so a bunch of micro data points drives the overall economy. And from right now, I see nothing alarming from the micro data points.
What do you say, you mentioned in your prior life, of course, you were a hedge fund manager, long career. We have Jamie Dimon out there saying a recession is likely. Just yesterday, Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon said the prospect of a recession has increased. You know these leaders well. Mm-hmm. What do you say to these folks that are worried about a recession?
Look, I think that the news cycle, for whatever reason, is focused on tariff policy, and the Trump economic policy that I'm part of the team that's in charge of implementing it is really a three-legged stool. So tariffs are getting the majority of the publicity now, but we were having very good luck, or very, very good progress. It's not luck because it's been a lot of hard work on the tax bill. So the tax bill is moving through the Senate, moving through the House. I think we're going to have some permanence for the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, probably by 4th of July. And I think that will give people certainty. And then the third leg is deregulation. So the tariffs came in quickly, taxes by midsummer, and then we think the deregulation, which could be substantial savings for households, will kick in third, fourth quarters.
Why do you think then the likes of Jamie Dimon and David Solomon, why would they be concerned?
Look, that's their job, is to be concerned. But again, I think that there is all this chatter on tariffs, and what we're worried about. And I come from Wall Street. I think Wall Street can continue to do great, but we are focused on Main Street. And My cousin who lives in coastal Georgia called me and said, congratulations, the gas here is $1.98. It's below $2 for the first time. So, I think that we've got to look at it kind of on a holistic basis, everything that's going on. There's something called FCI, or Financial Conditions Index, and that's a combination of what's the stock market doing, what are interest rates doing, what's energy doing, what's the currency doing, and financial conditions, they are still in a very good spot.
Some experts I've talked to, Mr. Secretary, they acknowledge that gas prices have come down, but they, in the same breath, say that is because the economy has slowed. Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, everybody wants to have it both ways. That 2 weeks ago, there were all these stories, and as you know, Brian, that this year, I've tried not to talk about the stock market because the stock market is really a long-term proposition, and it's more fun that when it goes up in the short term, less when it goes down, but that people should be in it for the long term, and over the long term, it is the best asset for retail investors. But what I've been focused on is lowering energy prices and lowering the 10-year yield. So 2 weeks ago, 10-year yield hit 3.90, and I said, oh, well, Secretary Bessent's getting what he wanted, but for the wrong reason. Then it popped up last week to 4.50, and it's the end of the dollar, it's the end of the U.S. as a reserve currency, and in my mind, it was just a bunch of over-leveraged speculators who were getting stopped out.
So no foreign countries dumping treasuries?
We actually saw the opposite last week. We had 3 big auctions, and the 10 and 30-year auctions, which are when foreign buyers tend to come in, which is where they can buy in size. We actually saw very good foreign accumulation of 10-year and 30-year bonds.
Of course, as you know, Mr. Secretary, China is the second largest holder of treasuries, and some would say they could retaliate by selling treasuries given how things are going on the trade front. Does that keep you up at night, the fact that the Chinese could sell treasuries and impact negatively our economy?
I could burn down my house if I had an argument with my spouse, but it's not going to do me very much good. So that if they started selling treasuries, they would they'd have an effect on the price. But more importantly, they accumulate dollars. And what are they going to do with the dollars? So if they sell treasuries, then they would have to buy RMB, and it would strengthen their currency. And they've been doing just the opposite. They've had a weak RMB or yuan, the policy. So it really serves no purpose for them to weaponize treasuries.
If you saw them trying to weaponize treasuries, how does the Treasury Secretary respond?
Look, we have a big toolkit. We do buybacks. The Federal Reserve, I think if treasuries hit a certain level, or if the Federal Reserve believed that a foreign, I won't call them an adversary, but a foreign rival, were weaponizing the U.S. government bond market or attempting to destabilize it for political gain, I am sure that we would do something in conjunction with each other, but we just haven't seen that.
You mentioned tariffs. We're less than 90 days out from the tariff pause ending, Mr. Secretary. How many deals do you envision being done by the time that pause would lift?
Yeah, well, Brian, let's set aside China. There are 15 large trading partners. We set aside China, there are 14, and we're in rapid motion and setting up a process for the 14 largest trading partners, most of whom have very large deficits. So in 90 days, are we going to have a complete a formal legal document done and dusted? Not likely, but I think if we follow the process, we could have substantial clarity on those 14 away from China in terms of agreements in principle. And then once we reach a level that we've agreed on and they've agreed to lower their tariffs, lower their non-tariff barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of industry and labor, then I think we can move forward.
Would tariffs still be in place, though, as part of any agreement?
Depend on what they have on offer. I'm telling everyone, bring your A game. And also, they should all know, for the big countries, President Trump wants to be involved.
What does a first mover get?
Well, traditionally, first mover gets the best deal. So I'd encourage everyone to come fast and come with a great deal.
Have you talked to your counterpart in China?
We did an introductory call a couple of months ago. We haven't spoken since. I'm not sure who from PRC will be. Next week is a big week in Washington. It's the International Monetary Fund World Bank Week. So I know that People's Republic will send someone from finance, probably the PBOC, People's Bank of China governor. So they will be here. I may bump into them. We don't have anything scheduled.
How much is the president willing to go beyond 145% tariffs on China, or is that the ceiling?
Look, I think no one thinks that these are sustainable over the long run. But with President Trump, I'm not going to give away his negotiating strategy on a widely viewed network like Yahoo. So I think, as with President Trump, he gets maximum strategy because he keeps everything on the table all the time.
What I imagine can't help, Mr. Secretary, is that on his trip to Vietnam, China President Xi Jinping said tariffs, quote, are unilateral bullying. I mean, I can't imagine that helps this process at all.
Look, also, I think the Chinese trade minister said the tariffs were a joke. And I don't know, maybe Chinese have a different sense of humor than I do, but I don't think there's anything funny about it. But I also don't think there's anything funny about the intellectual property theft that they've done, the blockage that we've had on reciprocal trade with them, the tariffs that they put on, the subsidies that they do for labor, for industry. So I don't see anything funny about it.
What's the best endgame scenario for the relationship with the U.S. and China in terms of tariffs?
Well, Brian, for your viewers, and I used to teach economic history, so if you just give me a moment or two, there were a lot of big trade and currency deals in the 1980s. President Reagan did Japan auto deals. Then there was something called the Plaza Accord, the Louvre Accord, and what was important and different about those was in the 80s, our economic rivals were our military allies. So most of the Europeans and the Japanese, and that there was the Soviet Union, and then China, but China really wasn't a force back then. What's very different this time, and we are in uncharted waters here, is for the first time, our largest economic rival is also a military rival. So we are going to have to deal with this in a different way. Now, I think that the Chinese, I think they would acknowledge, but they've been reluctant to do it, and every macroeconomist who follows China, who I know, believes that the Chinese need to do a big rebalancing. They are the most unbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they favor production and manufacturing over consumer. And relative to their share of world population, relative to their share of GDP, they export more than any other country ever has. So the first contour of a deal would be for them to take steps to increase consumption, help households, and stop the subsidy to the manufacturing sector. And so, a a good deal would look like they rebalance toward more consumption, less state subsidized manufacturing. In the U.S., we have a bit less consumption, and we bring back a manufacturing base, and that could work very well together in a symmetric way. But we haven't seen any interest on their side to do that.
Sounds like a lot needs to be done, Mr. Secretary, to reach a deal with China.
Look, these are two big economies. I think the good news at the end of the day is that President Trump, Chairman Xi, have a lot of respect for each other. They've been in contact before, and they've done deals together.
The market has gotten excited because certain electronics will be excluded from tariffs. That exclusion, did that come about after a conversation with Apple CEO Tim Cook?
I wasn't on the exclusion.
Now, Apple has said, specifically Tim, that it's hard to make products in the U.S. I believe it was a 2015 interview, in part because the skills aren't here to make these iPhones and make them profitably. New report out of Woodbush Securities, Mr. Secretary, suggests if an iPhone is built in the U.S., it costs $3,500. Would that be acceptable to the administration?
Look, I haven't seen any of that, and I know Apple's been moving quite a bit of their supply chain into India, and I also think you don't need a PhD in mechanical engineering to assemble an iPhone. So I'm not sure why Tim Cook says that the skills aren't here.
But the prices to make it would still cost more, and and Apple would have to trade. It's not, they can't open a factory overnight.
Of course not. Of course not. So over time, they'll move their supply chains, and they've been moving out of China for a long time. We've seen a lot of manufacturing move to Vietnam, move to India.
How important was it to get news that NVIDIA is going to spend $500 billion here to make AI supercomputers?
NVIDIA, I believe, has 98%, which is incredible, of the upper end chip market. And I think that for NVIDIA to bring this home is very important. And one of the greatest security concerns for global economy is the number of chips made on the island of Taiwan. To have one of the most important components made in one place is not great risk management. But you could say that about anything. Like you wouldn't want anything, wouldn't want to source just one thing from one place, especially when the whole world runs on it. I mean, imagine that if Abu Dhabi were the only place in the world that pumped oil. It's the equivalent of that.
I talked to a lot of CEOs, Mr. Secretary, especially over the past 2 months, and these are their words, not mine. They have told me their businesses have started to fall into chaos. They can't plan for the next 5 to 10 years. They are now considering cutting back on marketing and how many people they're hiring. What's your message to these very large CEOs? They hold the economic purse strings in many respects that are having difficulty understanding what the administration is doing.
Well, again, as I said, I think we're going to have a lot more clarity on tariffs, and I assume that the reason you're asking me the question is because they have that view on tariffs, but we're going to have a lot more clarity on the way forward over the next 90 days, and then they'll also have clarity on tax and on deregulation. I remember in 2017, I heard a lot of the same things because the tax deal wasn't done until right before Christmas in 2017, and it was the same thing. We can't plan, we can't do this, we need clarity. So we're going to have clarity on tax, we're going to have clarity on deregulation, and I think over the next 90 days, it won't be finished, but we will have much more clarity on tariff policy.
You're also working very hard on taxes and President Trump's economic agenda as it pertains to the tax plan. How will the tax plan help someone making less than $100,000 a year?
Well, I think it depends on what they do, but or their age. But if you think about no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, we're going to go back to deductibility of auto loans if it's an American car, which when I bought my first car in the 80s, you were able to deduct auto loans. So people could take advantage of that. I think we will also see the surety of this staying in place, because what really fueled a lot of the economic growth during President Trump's first term was the full expensing of equipment by corporates. We're planning on full expensing of new factories also. So that's how we want to bring back manufacturing. You can write off the cost of your factory and the cost of your equipment in 1 year. And during President Trump's first term, because of these economic incentives and the private sector hiring, as opposed to what we saw from the previous administration, that we saw the real wage growth. And it was very substantial. It was higher for hourly workers and supervisory workers. We saw the bottom 50% of households' net worth increase faster than the top 10%. So I think we could expect that again.
Are you okay with letting tax breaks on the wealthy expire?
I think that we're looking at everything. We're looking at a range of revenue raisers, and I'm not going to get out ahead of the president, which is always a bad idea, and we'll see where the president comes down on that.
Lastly, Mr. Secretary, I know financial literacy is near and dear to your heart, and I think a lot of Americans have a lot of stuff coming at them, whether it's stock prices, stock price volatility, movements in the bond market. How can they go about becoming better investors?
Well, I think the more you read, the more you're informed. But I think the most important thing, what I've noticed, that there's a whole range of financial advisors now, and who are willing to educate you, very, very reputable from some of the biggest firms. But I think the most important thing that households can do in terms of financial literacy is understand your goals and understand the products that you're invested in, and kind of do a gut check and rate your personal risk tolerance. And obviously, a young person should have higher risk tolerance and a longer horizon. If you're getting closer to retirement, then your risk tolerance should be lower. But again, too, that there are no get-rich-quick schemes.
If someone was studying your career, I mean, how could they replicate what you did? I mean, you broke the Bank of England, Mr. Secretary.
Well, I also, a lot of it's timing. That I was a college freshman in 1980. Ronald Reagan was elected. Capital got treated very well for the next 4 decades. So we've had this incredible run. But again, to the extent I had a strength in my business, it was always risk management. You're always thinking, what amount of risk am I willing to take? What amount of risk are my investors willing to take? And you always want to be on your front foot. You always want to understand everything you're doing. You want to think about one big component of financial literacy is the household debt level. What amount are you able to save for a rainy day fund? But again, it all comes back to what are your goals? What amount of liquidity do you want? What are your personal circumstances?
Mr. Secretary, thank you for having us here inside Treasury. We really appreciate the time, and good luck on your work. It's very important.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.